Thank you so much, Tracy. Thanks a lot for introducing me. Let me go ahead and share my screen. Okay, there we go. I hope everybody can see my screen. Hello all, welcome to Redux, MobX, and what's next in state management. And who am I? My name is Deepa. I'm a software developer. I am also an organizer for Google Developer Group San Jose chapter. I'm an ambassador at Women Tech Makers and an active member at Women Who Code. I also write blogs on Medium. These are the ways that you can connect with me, but I'll also post my LinkedIn at the end as well. And every slide would have my Twitter handle at the top, right? Okay, let's see. We will be talking about state management. What is it? The types of state in React, and why state management is hard, and what are the options available. And we'll see a small code snippet of each and every one of them, and we'll discuss about the pros and cons of each, and we'll wrap it up at the end. So my assumptions are you should have a solid understanding of ES6 features such as promises, callbacks, and then you should have basic React knowledge, props, states, hooks, etc., and some amount of what is an observable, what is PubSub, what is a consumer, what is a provider, and things like that. This talk is primarily catered for people who have knowledge about React and trying to learn something about state management and the options available. And it would be an overview of all the state managements that I picked up few and I wanted to talk about them. And I just wanted to mention here that I'm by no means not an expert to say which one you should be using for your application. I can just guide you as what are the things that are available, and then you can pick and choose from them, right? Okay, so now, what is state, right? Any interactivity that changes your application's looks and feels and does something to your app. For example, you click a button and then you see a notification that shows up. These all changes the state of your application. So app state depends on certain types, right? So React has the following state types. You can have a data type, communication, control type, session type, and a location type. So what is data state? Data state is the state that stores your data temporarily, and every piece of data that either has a type or a selector. It contains some information about what has been received. Now, what is communication state? Communication state is the status of any not yet completed request. You're waiting for something from your other services, and that particular state is called communication state. So some of these communication state would have type and selector of any data you expect to receive. And some might need whatever the operation that you do might need the data that you have requested. So for example, if you see a spinner that's loading on your web page or any error messages that shows up, these are the states that you can call it as communication state. So now, control state. What is control state? On a contradictory, this has nothing to do with your app. It is specific to a container component, and it is a state where the user has input into the app and is just waiting. For example, you add an item to the cart. You're trying to fill in the form, something like that. So this is called control state. Moving on to session state. Session state gives you information about your application users. It is a read-only state. For example, you're trying to book a flight, right? And it says that, hey, you have few minutes left to book this flight. And that's one of them. And then you also have some websites that show that, hey, you have been inactive for some time, so we are going to sign you out. So those are the things session state would contain. And location state is kind of tricky. It is the information stored in the URL. It's a whole different game. So every time if it changes, you will need to, for example, if you press a back button in a web page, right? So every time it changes, you will need to find other state that has to change along with it. So you need to use something called as previously there was something people used as history object, but now it's better to use something called as a location object to determine your location state. So state management, and because of all these states, state management becomes hard. So oftentimes you need to fetch data from the server, look up something from your database, or you might need to change based on your lookup and data fetched from the server. You need to change the UI too. This becomes cumbersome. So to add on to more why state management is hard, you need to define the store structure, where do you put them in, and then you also need to know whether your state is mutable, immutable, whether you can store it locally or globally, and how would you handle dependent state data, and how would you possibly set all your API requests and stuff like that. So it also depends on how you store, how would you mock store while testing as well. So, okay, we saw what a state, we know it's hard to manage. So what do we do now, right? So is there any way out? Yes, we do. States can be managed. State can be managed using React's prop drilling and context API, or using third-party libraries. So I'm going to be starting off with third-party libraries. I'm just going to talk about what are the libraries that are available. There are so many libraries available out in the market. I'm going to be listing some of them. React Redux is one of them. MobX is one. Recoil, Hook State, ZooStand, React Query, Jotai, Akita, and Recoil Rematch. There are so many out there, but this is what I could fit in this slide, and these were some of the popular or well-known ones. So now let's see how these libraries trend currently in the market based on the number of downloads, based on recent usage, and what OpenBase recommends as well. OpenBase is a website where they list these libraries based on high ratings. So according to NPM trends, as you can see, Redux is clearly on the lead, and there's about 5 million downloads. And the rest of them, MobX is about 800,000, and then Recoil is catching up. We have only 200,000 around that. So this is another trend that I picked up from stateofjs.com, and where the users were sent out questionnaires to fill in what are the libraries that they are using, and based on their questionnaire collection, the data collection, Recoil has been leading in 2020. This is the data from 2020, and followed by the rest of them: React, jQuery, ZooStand, and other libraries that are available there. And OpenBase rates, it is highly rating React Query, and followed by React Redux, and the rest of them are all. This is based on not on downloads, but highly rated by developers. Okay, we will go through these. So we'll talk about prop drilling and context API. And I've picked up 3 third-party library here to compare to see how, because these are the popular ones, and Recoil being the newest one. So just to give you a visual of React component tree, here are 3 components. One is nav, post, and then footer, right? Post contains 3 other components, and so on and so forth. So now, what prop drilling. So React has this feature called props, which are nothing but properties. You can pass these props from a higher level component, from a parent component to a child component. And this is called as prop drilling, which resulted in a repetitive code. And to keep track of these properties in each component was like this. So if you can see, it starts off at the top, and then when you go down all the way, it's like very similar to callback hell in a JavaScript. So you have to keep track of every single props that you use here. So because of that, React came up with an API called Context API, as the previous method was inefficient, because you have to keep track of every props that you're passing. This API provides a way to pass data through the component tree without having to pass manually at each and every level. So you need to import this particular API when you use with React. And the use context method creates a internal global state, and it passes the data. So it can also be used along with use state to share between nested components. So the drawback of this API is the performance. As your app becomes larger, the performance of this goes down. But however, having said this is an option. If you're a beginner who's trying to learn and build with this API, it's a good choice. Like on the left-hand side, if you see this is how Context API works. You have to pass in every context, and then finally it looks like this. And this is also becomes sometimes inefficient as your application grows. So now let's talk about Redux here. For example, if I have to go and fetch something from the section 1 here in this React tree, so I have to go from app. From there, I have to go to posts, and then from there, I have to go to section and videos, and then to text. So is there a way that this is what prop drilling did? Somehow Context API also did the same thing. So is there a better way to do it? Yes, you can store the state using Redux. So now comes the question, what is Redux? It is a third-party application, a standalone library for managing and updating your state using something called as actions. Redux is mainly used when you have large teams, you're working with a large application, then this is the best choice that people have adopted. And there are common packages that comes with it, Redux Toolkit, Redux DevTool extension, and if you have to install Redux, however, you have to use Redux, React Redux. Redux is also used for other frameworks. For example, if you want to use it along with Angular, it can be used there as well. So let me see if I can click this. As you can see, Redux has a one-way data flow. And the state here is immutable. What happens is, if you see this GIF is very self-explanatory. So action, action is packed along with type and payload, which is then dispatched, and it gets to the store where it dispatches the actions to your reducer. And reducer is basically pure function that takes up the state of the application's action, and then that was dispatched. And based on the action types, it changes the UI. I know this code is kind of, the code snippet here is kind of crowded, but just watch. These are the things the Redux goes through. Note that the terminology I've mentioned: action, store, reducer, and dispatch, right? So I'm using actions here to say what is the payload here, what is like and dislike. I'm going to share the same code snippet at the end, but please bear with me till then. So, and reducer, it's sending, it's sending it to the reducer, and then from here, it has reducer has the state and the action, and it gets to the store, and it gets dispatched. Now, talking about the pros and cons of Redux. Redux is very popular. It's been around from 2015, and it's got a great. It's a great it's a very good tool with a lot of development tools and a lot of community support as well. However, there are some cons that come with it too, right? So here I've mentioned immutable state on the pros. It could be a pro and cons as well. So Redux has a learning curve. If you talk about the learning curve of Redux, you have to learn a lot of terminologies. It's got a steep learning curve. You have to have a lot of boilerplate APIs, and then there's something called as if you need to use a Redux thunk. Redux thunk is a middleware that can either delay your dispatch of action, or it can dispatch only if certain conditions are met. So there's a lot of things that are involved here. If you know how to use this tool, yes, it's a good thing. But then if you are starting to learn, it might be a steep learning curve. So now let's move on to MobX. MobX is based off of functional reactive programming. You use something called as observer and observable patterns. Observer pattern allows you to build a dependency tree amongst different parts of state and produces free rendering of components just by keeping track of what needs to be mutated. So behind the scenes, it detects the changes and it uses ES6 proxies. MobX team documentation mentions that anything that can be derived from an application state should be derived automatically. So you basically define a state and make it observable, create a view that will observe for the state change. Then you'll modify using the actions. So here is the thing. So if I have an action in one of these observer component, it's passed on to the store, and then it's passed in as a prop. So I have a, I've just underlined all these keywords here, but I'll pass on a code snippet at the end as well, so that everybody can take a look at it. So what are the pros and cons of MobX? It manages truly in a reactive way. And here, again, it uses MobX, uses some, you can mutate your state. However, it's a pro and a con depending on your situation. There's no, you don't have any tedious steps of dispatching. You don't have any action reducers and stuff like that. You don't need a special setter function as to work with MobX. One thing, it is also written in TypeScript, so you don't have to have Babel installed or some other third party for typed for making your app type specific ones. And the cons are it is not as widely used as Redux, and it does not have a support for IE, Internet Explorer 11 or below, but it's very popular among developers. Now, moving on to Recoil. Recoil is Facebook's open source management tool. It uses, under the hood, it uses hooks, and it retrieves the states and updates it. It works very similar to React, so you can call it as Reactish. It uses pure functions to query data. If you see, Recoil creates a data flow graph, like here, and that flows from atoms, which contains shared state, through the selectors, which consists of pure functions, and down to your React components. So these are the methods that are available in Recoil. You can use it along with the atom. And selectors represent a function, right? So it derives state of in recoil. The selector is a value that you would get it from Atom or other selector too. So for consumers, there's no difference between an Atom or selector. They just need to subscribe and pass it and use it wherever they want to. So a component can subscribe to an Atom to get or set its value. So here is an example. Here is Atom that contains the state. And then here I'm using the selector. And recoil root is a root that manages state. It provides a context in which atoms have values. So, and then it finally returns the value using use recoil value. So now, what are the pros and cons of recoil? Yes, it's the pros are it's by Facebook. It's very similar to React. So you can, if you know React, you can just, and it's just a JavaScript backend, right? So you can easily use this, and it's also designed for performance. However, it's a new and still an experiment. I have researched on this, and I did not find anybody who uses recoil, any company using recoil. And it's made for Facebook. So it is made for specific needs, for their internal needs, and it may or may not be your choice. So we've talked about a lot of options here. We talked about prop drilling, context API, MobX, Redux, and then recoil. So which one would you choose with? Is it this or that, right? So MobX can be used for both client side and server side. Recoil is still only available for client side, and Redux is mainly client side. Although because it's in JavaScript, you can still make it work along with something else to make it work with the server side as well. And the terminologies, yes, it's all very similar. All of them change the state somehow. Either it's MobX uses immutable state, whereas Redux uses immutable state. It's very explicit. You have to specify everything in Redux, but then MobX you don't need to. It's just that you create observable state. And the learning curve, if you are a functional programmer, and it's very easy to pick up MobX and get going with that. Recoil is very, very easy if you know how to use React hook states. And Redux is something that has got a very steep learning curve. So performance-wise, MobX, you don't have any boilerplate, so it is meant for performance. For recoil, it's not sure, though they say that it's meant for performance, and we don't know yet. It's still an experiment. And for Redux, you have a lot of boilerplate. You have to. It's good in a way, but you can explicitly say whatever you want to define, how you want your state to be. You can put all those information. However, it could involve a lot of boilerplate code too. And who's using what, right? I just picked this up. I'm not so sure according to Ben or based on the year, but then some people who are using this are MobX is being used by Udemy, Canva, and Front and Stack, and Redux is being used by Amazon, Robinhood, and Stack, and DoorDash too. So Redux was used by Instagram as well. I'm not so sure whether they still use it. And Redux has been used by over 2,000 companies, whereas MobX it's about 150 or something like that. But still, it's an easy choice. It's got its own pros. So in summary, we saw what is a state, what are the types of state, and why is it hard to have a state, have your state maintained. And what are the options available? They did see code snippets, but then I'm going to show you this in a minute, and then we saw the pros and cons. So finally, the choice depends on what type of application you are building. What is your, sometimes it's like, what is your team's expertise? Whether people are, people know Redux already, people know already how to use MobX. Depends, right? It's a choice that you need to pick up based on your application and what are your needs. Finally, this, I just wanted to point out this. I was coming through this document. When I was researching this guy called Cameron. This was an article in Medium. He came up with something called this MobX. I'm not so sure whether people use it or not, but he combined the good parts of MobX and Redux together. So who knows, maybe sometime you can pick up something that you like from each of these libraries and make your own library too, right? Customize it for your own. So with that said, happy hacking and keep coding. So I have a demo of, Nick, if you could post that link, that will be very helpful now. Here, I think I have it it's a very simple application that I built. All it does is, I have it in Recoil now. Okay, I have the same application where you can track the likes and dislikes, and it gets stored in here. On it gets the state changes on the total likes. So it's the same thing, but then I have it as I have written out code for Recoil, Redux, and prop drilling and context API if you want to take a look at it. And let's go with the Recoil one. Like I said, we are, I'm importing all the, I'm importing Atom, Recoil root, selector, use Recoil state, and use Recoil value here. I'm importing all of these. This is the mock data I have. As you know, Atom is a piece of data that's shared here. It's sharing the lib state, and the lib state is used inside the selector here. It gets a value. And if you go on and it provides a context. So provides a context Recoil root here. And then if you go down all the way below, it says it also returns the value with Recoil state as how many number of likes and dislikes. So if I keep pressing this, it updates it here. And then if I go ahead and change it, it does it as well. So that's something that I wanted to show. And I'm also using this Recoil state here as well. So on the left, if we could go and see the Redux one, let me change this to Redux. That's a very similar thing. We talked about actions, how it gets passed on to, it gets its state, the reducer gets its state from action and state. And if you go here, it gets stored. And finally, it gets shown here. Yeah, it gets dispatched here, sorry. So this is what I wanted to show. And I think that's all I have. Thank you so much, Redux Houston, for having me here. And yeah,